Swami Rinpoche Chodo Suju Nang Darin Kovan Jaji Manu Renkin Ling Rapa Tombara Ule Nepal Mies Atajek Lutin Dara Temba Tomki Nong Zambari Songi Sembai Sidi Chu Manupata Yoi and Marang Lutin Tanjo Consumption Tolo and Lamansen Tembanjai in Tenga Ungo Damo Samo Tolo. I did out then Consum Soba Tanikala and Kovan Day Tari Taki Bui.
As we have heard yesterday from among the teachings of Kadampa-Stories texts, the union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, now is the time to turn your back on samsara. And he continues to say, if you are unable to do so, you will be nothing other than someone returning from an island of jewels with empty hands. So as we have heard yesterday in great detail, we find ourselves in the fortunate situation that in our age, in our world into which we have been born, a Buddha has appeared. This Buddha has taught the Dharma. The Dharma of this Buddha is still extant in this world. On top of this, we have been fortunate enough also to meet authentic teachers. We have received instructions from them, we have received empowerments from them, writing empowerments, etc. and so forth, and we have given rise to the attitude that allows us to concern ourselves with learning and practicing of Dharma in the first place. Therefore, we must consider ourselves extremely fortunate, because all of these exceedingly rare conditions have come together. If we were not to use this precious opportunity that we have been presented with at this present time, it would be an utter waste. It would be a complete waste of time, a complete waste of effort, and we would indeed be like someone who travels to the proverbial Jewel Island and returns empty-handed. So having come into the possession of all of these circumstances and possibilities, we ought to make an effort to now find a way out of this cycle of constant rebirth, this cycle of suffering. And which are the means to do so? The means which are to be applied in order to bring about a breaking out of this constant cycle are the various means of training, the various means of practicing, the various means of familiarizing ourselves with all of this Dharma content. If we should truly be able to bring about experience through our study and practice of the Dharma, we would then gradually progress towards the awakening of Buddhahood. We would completely step out of this cycle of samsara, this cycle of constant rebirth, and we would achieve Buddhahood. Having achieved Buddhahood in such a way, we would in turn be able to guide others upon that path which leads to the liberation from the cycle of sufferings, and lead them onto the path that eventually will bring them to the awakening of Buddhahood as well. For the most part, people nowadays do not have very much time at their disposal in order to practice, in order to learn the Dharma. For the most part, people have to go, after their livelihoods, have to go to work in order to earn money to pay their rents, fill their fridges, buy clothes, whatever. So you need to have a job, and that takes up most of your time. However, even though that is the case, there are still some who do find the time, who make the time to do some practice. Some might do so early in the mornings before they're off to work. Others might do so in the afternoons or in the evenings, whenever it is convenient. So indeed, there are people who, even though they have lots of other things to do find the time, do make the time to do some practice. However, there are also some who do not have to work. They have all the conditions together, they have income and livelihood, they have a house, and yet they still do not use their time for practice. They go to sleep early just in order to sleep a little bit longer in the morning, and then the day runs its course, slowly, bit by bit, whatever is to be done during the day is being done. And then as the day goes by, it grows into the evening, and then of course one has to relax a little bit from all the things that one did not do during the day. And sit down in front of the television. That's what you got the thing for in the first place, now haven't you? And then the day's been gone by, and that was that. No practice has been done. So in such case, such people might then wake up as early as 10 or 10:30 or 11 o'clock. They might stretch themselves, and they're absolutely unamused about the fact that the day is getting underway now. Now, all of that wouldn't really matter that much if we had a good idea about how long our life is going to last. However, we do not have such an idea. For some, by all means, life might continue for many more years. For others, it may only be months. And there may be a few for whom it might only be a few more days. Who knows? No one can say with any certainty whatsoever when death will overcome them. And when death is then finally on their doorstep, well, then there is a whole lot of crying and lamenting about all the things that you haven't done. If such is the case, you might wish to examine why it is the case, what the problem is. And you might wish to understand why things are the way they are. Well, there are these four thoughts. The thought about the precious human body, how extremely difficult it is to achieve it, how it is endowed with the 8 freedoms and the 10 riches. There's also the next thought about death and impermanence, which invariably will, at one time or other, overtake each and every one of us. Then there's the thought about the law of cause and effect, which simply says that each and every deed that we perform will bring about a similar such result. And then there's the thought, the fourth of these four thoughts, about the fundamental, about the state of rebirth within this cycle of sufferings, which is fundamentally dissatisfactory. It's a clear sign that we have not sufficiently contemplated these thoughts, that we have not sufficiently reflected about them. And that being the case, we just happily waste our time from day to day.
아, 그러면 단체 와서 웅글이 싸움에 공을 대해서 생는 이제 짜요. 아니 대에는 되는 따가 공을 양는지 그뭐만 양도도 양 되는 이게 사실 되는요. 남이네 남대게 자라 이게 남에게 자라 공이야. 난 단체 와서 저기 싸움에 되는 공을 예정돼 미워봐. 다들 이제 힘과 성대와 대연들 공을 것에 대한 미워한 힘과 동서로 성만 다들 이게 로지.
A story of one of the early Kadampa geshes, the geshe Chagarwa, shows how one could, for instance, really take this thought of the difficulty of achieving a precious human rebirth into consideration. He has truly done so. For the most part of his life, he constantly reminded himself of how difficult it is to bring together the circumstances for such a precious rebirth, and he practiced accordingly. And it is said of him that that having been the case, him having realized this fully, that he did not allow himself all too much time to sleep. Stories told of him that he would sleep only for a little bit, for a couple of hours until about midnight, and after midnight he would rise again in order to practice, in order to make the best possible use of that precious body of his. In particular, he practiced the meditation deity of the Yidam Miyowa, or Achala as he is known, and in his lifetime he managed to repeat 300 million mantras in this way, using his time to the best of his ability.
아니 양가담을 되게 커럽 검증도 되고 어데는 요사 가부노나 여기 가부고다 설명주 풍부들 설명 생각 좀 공부도 참동을 해주는 거라 근데 풍부요 근데 마 배운 딱 보시니까 같은 통도 야 근데 지금도 상도 설명 내가 지금 아 상도 야 지를 내가 뭐고 요래 다 얘 나랑 다 마지로 다들 여로 토병한 뭐 강시 뭐 따라서 되는데 좀 그냥 여진지 양 거기가 책을 통 안데 바퀴 부분도 참 야, 다들 내가 뭐래 다 뭐 이만 아마고 로드 요아 내가 강시 뭐 따라서 되는데 된다고 좀
Another such Kadampa geshe by the name of Karab Longchung. He was also very famous for his practice, and he spent many years in seclusion in a cave practicing very intensively. And right in front of his cave there grew a rather large thorny bush. And each and every time when he stepped out of his cave in order to relieve himself or do anything else for that matter, he would always catch his clothes in the thorns of that bush. He would scratch himself, and each and every time as he squeezed past that bush, he thought, oh, I should really cut that bush down. But then the next thought, which immediately followed this one, was, well, what if I'm being overtaken by impermanence in the meantime? I could die any second. My time would be wasted cutting down this bush instead of practicing. So he went about his business without cutting down the bush, and he returned to his cave. He caught his clothes again, he scratched himself again, and again he thought, cut it down, but then again the other thought popped up, and no, I rather don't cut it down, I rather use my time for practice. In this way, for many years, he practiced in his cave. That thorn bush never got cut down, and he is a great example for someone who had truly taken the thought of impermanence, which can strike at any moment, to heart.
다 대답했더니 나랑 로만 가시 제가 강과 요래 빼서 요래 늘한다 사죠 말에 세나 동안 요 말에 두세배 영의 제비 쭉빼 맛을 야보래 다 영의 제비 두대 다 영의 제 적으면도 남인가 레로다 밤이 되거나 연도와 무슨 종종도 상도 대당시 차량성 때문에 안전에 가던 저하면 더 봐라 계속 상황하나 계속 행.
Rinpoche says he actually has several students like this. who actually have all of the right circumstances together. They don't have to worry about their livelihood. There is money, there is a house, and all the outer circumstances that you could possibly wish for are there. Yet they're still not really making much use of their time. Now, instead of complaining about like, oh, my practice isn't going well, or who's surprised if you're not doing any, you would actually be well advised to do what Rinpoche has just explained, to contemplate thoroughly the wonderful circumstances that you have at your disposal, to contemplate the freedoms and the riches and the possession of which you find yourself, and that would be very beneficial for you. To repeat Karma-Chakma's words again, now is the time to turn your back on samsara. If you're unable to do so, you'll be nothing other than someone returning from an island of jewels with empty hands. This is the classic example that was used in former times, during which one imagines that somewhere out there in the oceans of the world there is a huge island consisting of nothing but jewels. Many people search for such an island, and if one would eventually get there, one would of course be expected to fill one's coffers, to fill one's crates and pockets and whatever one might have with as many jewels as one could possibly carry away. To actually find that island and return empty-handed would not be particularly clever, now would it? The same thing pertains to our life. At this time, we are in the fortunate position to have brought all of these rare circumstances together. Now, not to use this lifetime to the very best of our ability, not to make use of all the Dharma that we have at our disposal, not to put it into practice to the best of our ability, and only at the end, towards the end of our life, to have to admit to yourself that actually you haven't got anything much together, that would be just as wasteful. Karma-Chakma continues to say, it is only just possible for something like this to come together again in the future, which means to say that theoretically, yes, it could possibly happen, but there's no way to be sure about it, and there's certainly no way to be sure when, if at all, it is going to happen. So, in this regard, we would be very well advised to make the best possible use of all of these opportunities that we have at our disposal now. Karma-Chakma goes on to say, in particular, the unsurpassable Mantrayana or Vajrayana will not be taught by the 1,000 Buddhas from Maitreya onwards, and you will have no hope of receiving it. Now we have heard that we find ourselves in the fortunate Eon in which 1,000 Buddhas appear. That's all nice and well. All of these Buddhas do teach the Dharma. But there's only a single one who taught the Mantrayana or the Vajrayana. The previous 3 Buddhas which appeared before the Buddha of our age, Shakyamuni, the Buddhas Krakatanda, Kanaka, and Kashyapa, did not teach the Vajrayana. They did teach Dharma by all means, but they did not teach the skillful means of the Vajrayana or the secret Mantrayana, as it is also known. Also from the next Buddha onwards, the Buddha Maitreya, all the way up to the 1,000th Buddha of this fortunate Eon of ours, who is by in Tibetan is called Mepanangsit. All of these Buddhas will teach the Dharma, yes, by all means, but they will not teach the Vajrayana. So again, in this regard, we find ourselves in an extremely rare and fortunate situation that we now live in the time of the Buddha who has taught the Vajrayana, and that this Vajrayana is still extant, available for us. We will not be able to receive these Vajrayana instructions again in future times. Now we presently live in the age of the 4th of these 1,000 Buddhas, in the age of the Buddha Shakyamuni, and we're fortunate to have received these teachings and instructions which originate with him. When the age of Buddha Shakyamuni will come to an end, then the next Buddha will appear, who presently is known as the regent or the representative of Buddha Shakyamuni, by name of Maitreya. He will be the next Buddha that will appear in this world. Even though that is the case, he has not yet appeared, there are emanations of Buddha Shakyamuni, of Buddha Maitreya in this world, and presently our Thai Siddha Rinpoche, His Eminence Thai Siddha Rinpoche, is known to be such an emanation of Buddha Maitreya. And then that's somebody that is only the Songji Trupa, Trupa Singing of Gamma, Trupa Singing Gamma. I don't take any Songji to children or and again, eventually also the era of the Buddha Maitreya, who is yet to come, will draw to a close, and then eventually the 6th of these 1,000 Buddhas will appear. He will be known as, with his Tibetan name, as Sengenotu Dusumchen, and he will be none other but the master who nowadays we know as the Jalan Kama. Songji Tangji Pele, Tangji Getane, Songji Tangji, Yimantara, Songji Muba Nonzi, Songji Muba Nonzi, Jangan Yanson. In this way, one after the other, these 1,000 Buddhas will appear in this fortunate age of ours, and when finally the last of these 1,000 appears, who will be known as Mepanangsit in Tibetan, he will be none other but the one who we know nowadays as Jambu Kongtrul Rinpoche. Only because the Buddha of our age, Buddha Shakyamuni, has taught the secret Mantrayana or Vajrayana, only because of that was it possible that so many great masters of the past, masters of India, masters of Tibet, etc., were actually able to practice these teachings, to familiarize with them, themselves with them, and to actually gain all of the qualities of awakening, all the various miraculous abilities, etc., which are commonly known as siddhis. This was solely due to the kindness of our present age's Buddha Shakyamuni having taught the Vajrayana. Story may serve here as an example of the great master Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna, when he was alive in this world, he once upon a time practiced or found himself in a city in the area which was then called Bangala, which is Bengal, mostly present-day Bangladesh. And he lived in a city there which was known in the olden days as Tenga, nowadays At that time in this city there was a couple. The man was called Roth, his wife's name was Guna, and they had several children, yet they were rather without any means. They were not rich people, and the only means they had at their disposal for earning a livelihood was to go outside, to walk the streets, walk the countryside, and sing and dance, in return for which people gave them presents. The children of this couple, to specify, they had a son and a daughter who were also earning their livelihood by way of singing and dancing. On one day they came upon a spot of which it had been told that the great master Arya Nagarjuna would be living nearby. They found out where he lived, where he practiced in retreat, and they thought to go and visit Nagarjuna and to request teaching from him. As they then eventually found him, then they presented song and dance as an offering to Nagarjuna. And Nagarjuna, pleased, then asked them to please come in. He invited them into his retreat place. He offered them some tea and refreshments. And then, so as the two then sat with Nagarjuna, they noticed a painting, a Tenga, to hang behind him, a little bit above him. And they asked Nagarjuna, what is that Tenga? What is that painting that you have there on the wall behind yourself? And Nagarjuna answered, this Tenga shows my teacher, Dharma, but ordinary beings cannot see him. This Tenga was covered at the time, and he pulled the cover of the Tenga away, and indeed the only thing they could see was an empty frame. They could not see the actual figure of Nagarjuna's teacher. As they were sitting here with Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna thought to himself, what could I do for these two young people? Instruction, I will give you a very special Dharma. And he proceeded to give them first the Chakra empowerment. He then gave them the transmission and the explanations for the Chakra Tantras and practice instructions. And he then furthermore advised them to now, after having received these instructions, to go to a place in the mountains where the Mahasiddha Shabarika had attained accomplishment. He sent them off to that place and he told them, there you should go, to this place you should go, and train yourself in the practice of Chakra-Samvara. So they went off to this place, they practiced, and it turned out for several years, quite a number of years, that the brother mainly trained himself in Chakra-Samvara practice, whereas his sister took care of all the livelihood and all the support that was necessary for him to practice. After many years of practicing like this, at one point when he achieved realization, he achieved accomplishment, and he later then became known as the Mahasiddha Shabarika. So they were not sent to a place of Shabarikas, but that boy became Shabarika. All of this and similar such stories are only to show that it is actually possible to truly achieve the full awakening in a single lifetime, in a single body, through the practice of the secret Mantrayana or Vajrayana. And the same holds true for us if we would only exert ourselves. No matter what practice you might perform, be it Vajrayogini, Vajravarahi, or any other practice for that matter, potentially it is possible to truly achieve Buddhahood, to truly achieve full realization and liberation in a single lifetime. Amachaka continues then in the next verse, saying, if during this time, having this precious human body that is so difficult to obtain, you do not apply it to the goal of attainment, etc., and then the verse will continue later, this only means to say that we have these opportunities now, we have this precious human body, so therefore we will of course be well advised to make the best possible use of it. And then the verse continues, well, if not applying it in the proper way, it will not be long before you have to leave it, this human body, behind, to be eaten by birds and dogs or to be burned by fire. So this precious human body that we have presently achieved, no one knows when they will have to leave it behind, and if we're not making any good use of it, then the only thing that will happen with it will be that eventually it will become the food for animals, or it will be burned, it will be cremated. So therefore, let us be well advised to make the best possible use of this body while we have it.
Yeah,
now, of course, is the time to apply that which we have heard. Whatever Dharma teachings we heard, they need to be applied, and to that end, let us now do such an application. Let us now practice, meditate for a little while, either just practice peaceful resting, shamatha, concentrating upon the breath at the tip of your nose as you inhale and exhale, or simply rest in the empty nature.
Travail, c'est travail.
Time for questions.